Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, I'm happy to be here. Many thanks to the organizers, to ICR Tel Aviv and to A.M.I.R for organizing this event, for making this reunion happen. Also, thank you very much for thinking of inviting me to speak about the Jews of Timisoara. Thank you all for coming to find out more about the past and present of the Jews of Timisoara, and last but not least, to meet friends and hug them. I will touch upon some topics, too many actually, but we don't have the time to expand on them. I will give a short historical survey of the history of the Jews of Timisoara. I will briefly talk about the synagogues and religious life. I will try to highlight some of the contributions to the cityscape, the economic, cultural, and political development. And it was a great pleasure for me when I heard, as you listened to the mayor of Timisoara, Dominic Fritz, who mentioned this. So people are aware of the major Jewish contribution to the making of Timisoara. Timisoara is a city that became what it is also to a great degree thanks to the Jewish contribution. Then we'll see the impact of the communist regime on the demographic evolution. And we'll also raise the question what we can do to preserve the Jewish heritage. I will also try to mix in some short stories and anecdotes just to give more life to history. So I start with the beginning. The beginnings of Jewish life are under the Turkish rule of the city. At least that's the first testimony we have of Jewish existence from 1636. There's a tombstone of Azriel Asael. Now, there are even historians who speculate, was he a rabbi, was he a physician, was he a miracle-working rabbi or a physician? Actually, what we know about him, and that's a lot, actually is from the inscription on the tombstone, which tells us that he was a Sephardic Jew from Thessaloniki. It means that at the time, in the 17th century, there was a Jewish community in Timisoara. They had prayer houses and they had a cemetery. Now, if you look at the stone, you see that it is inclined, and I can tell you that from the side you can also see a deep crack in the stone, so it is really threatened by destruction. So now this is not a fundraising event, certainly not, but still, if there are any donors interested in supporting the Jewish community and maybe restoring this monument or contributing to the maintenance of the cemetery, then this is a gentle reminder that you can do so. Now, in 1716, Prince Eugene of Savoy rode through the gate, through the Turkish fortification gate into the town and conquered it. The Turks withdrew and the Austrian administration was introduced. Now, the gate got the name Prince Eugene's Gate, and the house you see on the right side stands on the very place where the gate stood in the 18th century. Now the house was built 150 years later, but it is also called Prince Eugene's House. And there is also a plaque remembering the event. Now there is an interesting detail about this gate.
the Jews of Timisoara were granted the right to rent space, rooms under the vault of the gate. You can imagine this gate was huge, and there was room enough under the vault. And so, and that was in 1739, so quite early. So in a way, the place that symbolizes the beginnings of the Austrian administration in Timisoara, that is, Timisoara as being part of the Western world, coincides with the place where the first institutionalized Jewish life began. Here you see the portrait of Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Oppenheimer. He was extremely renowned because he was such a learned man and a great orator, an outstanding personality. But he was not in such a high esteem because he worked miracles, of course. This legend surrounds his grave, which you can see on the right side. And the legend emerged actually after World War I, that is about 50 years after his death. What happened? The Christian keeper of the cemetery returned safe and sound from World War I, and then this is what he thought, that it was due to the magical powers of the rabbi. And the legend became alive and was spread, and it meant that this place became a kind of a place of pilgrimage for people mostly not Jewish, who put a pebble, put a small stone on it, or also leave slips of paper with wishes on it. Now, under the Habsburgs, the life of under the Habsburgs, life was for the Jews was not easy. There were restrictions and there was discrimination. At the time of Oppenheimer, not the conflict, but there is kind of conflict between the modernists and the traditionalists in the Jewish faith became more and more powerful. So they met at the Jewish Congress in Pest in 1868-69 and tried to find a compromise, but they failed. So there was a split in the Jewry of Timisoara and of the monarchy into Neolog and Orthodox Jews. The Neolog Jews were kind of Reform Jews, that is the kind we are mostly, who respected the laws, the rules, and the tradition, but not as much as the Orthodox. The Orthodox obeyed the rules strictly. Now, this change in the religious practice helped the Jews to integrate better into the society of the time and to produce outstanding values for the city and, of course, for themselves as well. Now, at the same time, the Austrian Empire changed its form. It became the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That is the double monarchy, and Timisoara belonged to the Hungarian monarchy. Now, that was good news for the Jews. They got equal rights, and which meant political emancipation. And you see that the political emancipation and the liberalization of the religious practice went hand in hand, which freed the Neologs, the Jews, from lots of constraints, and they could really flourish in the city. What you see is now, of course, a Getta synagogue, which was built in 1865. It was the highest building in the city, and you must imagine the city was very small at the time. It was girded by walls and surrounded by an esplanade that is an empty space where construction was forbidden. So in this small city, the synagogue was the highest building, and it stood proudly, and the whole city took pride in it. At the inauguration, the whole city was there, from the mayor, the army, military, the representatives of all faiths. 7 years later, Emperor Franz Joseph I re-inaugurated the synagogue. Also, the plaque you see is, commemorates this event. This was also something that is a testimony of the position of respect, of high esteem the Jews enjoyed in the city. Now here is a Fabrik new synagogue. It is called New Synagogue because there was another synagogue on the Strada Timocului before. It is a masterpiece designed by architect Lippold Baumhorn, and the whole city was actually in awe with it. It was so beautiful. And Lippold Baumhorn, as a consequence, received a lot of commissions, and so Timisoara can be proud, can boast of some architectural masterpieces designed by Baumhorn. The community was first status quo ante, that is a middle way between Neolog and Orthodox, but they became Neolog in the 1920s. You can see on the right side that's a picture taken in the 1970s. It was still resplendent, it was still beautiful and used and well attended. In 1986, it was closed because it was considered, it was thought that it was damaged by fungi, which actually turned out to be a wrong diagnosis. The fact that it was closed for such a long time accelerated this decay of the synagogue, which is a great pity, which is awful, actually a tragedy. But there are many efforts to try to find the funds to restore it, and you heard before the mayor said that funds were allocated to do some repair at least. Now we are going to listen to a prayer recited by my father, Rabbi Ernest Neumann, and try to imagine what the atmosphere was in this synagogue.
Ai sei de cumi se pot, me poine chi se pot, e serve jeve me je kadem je pun me Anscher jave dovname tike svoit, beweis Elohim ne alle weg verrogen.
So it is always emotional to hear the voices of the past. Here you see two postcards. On the left, you see the most important buildings in the city center, and of course, the synagogue. You can see it actually, of course. The synagogue, Getta synagogue is there. That's a matter of fact, of course. Then on the postcard on the right, you can see two huge, immense, and very beautiful houses of prayer, the Roman Catholic Church Millennium and the synagogue. this was also quite natural, you know, to put them side by side and to celebrate this win for this gain actually for the city. Now, this is also typical of the Timisoara spirit, and which came into being due to this multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-linguistic context. And this was a key element that in the life of the Jews of Timisoara, which knew breaks and lapses, but was largely peaceful as compared to other places. Here we have, I brought also the Josephine Orthodox Synagogue. The inauguration was as festive as in the other synagogues, and Mayor Karol Telbis was handed a golden key to the synagogue as a sign of respect, inclusion, and trust. It is still functional. Now, as I told you, I wanted to highlight a bit the Jewish contributions to the creation of the cityscape. Just have a look at the Victoria Square, former Piazza Opere. If you see from the right to the left, first the Lloyd Palace. It is a masterpiece of architect Lippold Baumhorn. Then the next beautiful palace was commissioned by Ernest Neuhaus, who also rests in the Jewish cemetery. And the Corner Palace is a marble palace which was designed and commissioned by architect Arnold Marble. On the left side, and this is only the side facade, is a Loeffler Palace, which is huge, which is the front facade is as wide, as broad as the palaces I showed you on the right. Now, this is not, now it doesn't really correspond to the present situation. The buildings on the right side, the three of them, were restored, and they are absolutely resplendent. They're brilliant. Their old splendor is again alive. Here I wanted to show you some other architectural gems. I don't want to go into detail, it is just too much for today, but they are, you might recognize them. They are all linked in one way or another to Jewish contributions, either the architect or the commissioner, or there are stories linked to them. Now, after World War I, Transylvania, the largest part of the Banat, was assigned came under the Romanian administration. Now, Jews, under international pressure, Romania was forced or was obliged to grant Jews full rights. So they became citizens with full rights, which meant that they brought huge achievements in all domains. I only give you 3 examples of personalities, great personalities. One is Zsigmond Sana. He was a banker mainly, but he was also a member in the executive board of most companies in Timisoara. But he was also a writer. He wrote studies on finance. He wrote short stories and even a brochure on Beethoven. Here is Rudolf Totis. He was for a time the owner of the Stefania Palace in Piazza Traian. He was a manager, general director of the wool industry ILSA, and also a diplomat. He was a consul of Belgium in Timisoara. Kalman Jacobi, a very interesting and endearing somehow personality. He was a manager of the shoe factory Turul, the biggest one in Romania, and he was he was also a politician, the leader of a political party, and at a certain time he was also vice president of the Jewish community. He emigrated he made Aliyah to Israel and is buried here. So I just wanted to show some contributions in the commercial domain. You can see on the left side the Ferber grocery store. Ferber Bernard was the owner of a wholesale grocery store. His son Eugene was the owner of a paint and varnish factory, and John, the grandson, is the owner of a chemical company in the US and the owner of the Azur company in Timisoara, which is a successor of the former paint company before the war. Now you can see, of course, the Moravec bookshop and printing house, absolutely legendary printing house, and the catch committee Shandor. He had an optical store which was also well known beyond the boundaries of the city. And then I just brought this because it was so kind of funny. There is an ad made by Vice Shandor, the owner of the Vice Pharmacy, which says that we are not going to die if we buy medicine at the pharmacy, at the Vice Pharmacy, of course. So that was, with a chutzpah, with a tongue-in-cheek chutzpah said. And I know that the granddaughter is somewhere here in the audience. Now, World War II. World War II, of course, was the break. It came this period of flourishing economically and culturally came to an end with the years of the war. The Second Vienna Award in 1940 assigned northern Transylvania to Hungary, which was at the time not so perceived as such a positive event for the Timisoara Jews, because at the time Romania was more violently anti-Semitic than Hungary. This changed, of course, in 1944, and it saved the Jews of Timisoara from deportation to extermination camps. Now, 1938-1942, about the anti-Jewish legislation was introduced. In 1942, there was a deportation. The deportation of the Jews was prepared in detail. Everything was prepared to do it. And people were prepared actually to be deported. When in October, Ion Antonescu withdrew the order, cancelled the order for various reasons. No time to expand on this. Anyway, that was a narrow escape for the Jews of Timisoara. And on the 23rd of August 1944, there was a coup d'etat of King Michael, which meant that Romania left the powers of the Axis and joined the Allies. Anti-Jewish measures were cancelled. It was really it was a very good event anyway, because it shortened the time of the war and saved a lot of lives and saved a lot of Jews. Now. You will look, of course, at the pictures. I picked them really haphazardly, in a way. Some people became famous, some didn't. Some are not with us anymore. But certainly, all of them, they emigrated. They left. I see that you are pointing to people. You recognize some of them. So they emigrated and they achieved something valuable, something good in their lives. Now, the Socialist Republic of Romania, well, you know quite well what it was. It was equal right. It granted equal rights to Jews. Anti-Semitism was officially condemned, but Zionists were persecuted in the late 40s and condemned to prison terms. The career progression was hindered. Jews were ousted from leading positions. But eventually, it was the expropriation, repression of freedom and freedom of movement and of speech, and the economic hardships which put an end to the existence of, not to the existence, I'm sorry, but which triggered massive immigration waves mainly to Israel, but also to Australia, to Germany, to the US, and so on. Now, just have a look at the demographic evolution. As said before, the Jewish population never exceeded 12%. It was a third, sometimes it was a third ethnic group after the Hungarians and the Germans. After the war, 1948, there were still 13,000 Jews. Then there was a break, and it declined really abruptly. But I must say, in all Romania, it is the same situation. As the last census, there were 2,378 people who registered as Jews. So, yeah, that's the situation. Now, I would like to recall the unforgettable Pesach, Purim, Hanukkah celebrations. And let's listen just for a few seconds to a song everybody looked forward to at each Seder evening.
Heide moide mege virade maar, zöder döven, hike med döven, sétale modar.
So, for lack of time, we don't have the time to listen to the end. There were wonderful religious services, and I'd like you to listen also to Otto Feller. If maybe some of you remember him, he had a beautiful, warm tenor voice, and this is a very rare recording. So again, quickly we fast forward. Looking back to 400 years of Jewish existence in Timisoara, we can say that there were long periods of fruitful coexistence in a multi-ethnic, religious, linguistic environment. There were restrictions and discrimination at times, but no pogroms, nor deportation. There were huge contributions to the economic, social, and cultural development of the city. The Jews of Timisoara left a lasting mark on the development of the city, and our task is to preserve the tangible and intangible heritage of the Jews. Now, conservation and transmission of the Jewish cultural heritage. There is a vibrant Jewish community life. It is absolutely amazing what the community can do. Conservation of the architectural heritage. Many people try to do it, and many things are also done. Oral history, it means that interviews with Jews of Timisoara. There are 2 books published by Smaranda Vultur, one by myself. Then there is a Jewish virtual museum, Rabbi Ernest Neumann, which I recommend you to visit. it has to be improved and completed, but still there are loads of documents, photos, stories. You can find a lot of information. And then, of course, the Association Pantograph, you will hear about that. Then there is a guidebook of Jewish Timisoara, now published in 3 languages, and which makes me very happy because it finds a lot of readers. And do visit Timisoara soon. It's worth it. The community is welcoming. The city is beautiful. Cultural life is uniquely rich, and the food is delicious. So thank you for your attention. Okay.